Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Guitar Genius Chat. I'm your host, Mike Philippov, of course. And today we're going to be talking about acoustic guitar playing. And what's interesting is on my channel, what I like to do is I like to take topics that most guitar players find very difficult or frustrating and find ways to break them down, make them simple. And when it comes to acoustic guitar playing, it's such a notoriously unforgiving instrument that there are few things many people find that are simple about acoustic guitar playing. And being that I am not really an acoustic guitar expert, I brought somebody, a very good friend of mine, who is an acoustic guitar teaching and playing expert, who I think is exceptionally great at taking many of these acoustic guitar concepts many people struggle with and finding ways to make them simple. And I am talking, of course, about my good friend, Simon Candy. Hello, Simon. Good to have you here.
G'day, Mike. How are you?
Doing well. Excited for this. So what we're going to do today is I asked Simon to come up with a list of ideas or things about acoustic guitar playing that are very simple for pretty much any guitar player to understand. They don't take a lot of practice time, and once you start using them, they're going to make you a better, more accurate guitar player and able to have a lot more fun with your acoustic guitar playing. So Simon, let's just dive straight into this. What are some of those things, starting with the first thing on your list, that somebody can do to make acoustic guitar easier and get better faster?
Okay, great. Awesome. So I will preface this with saying that if you're coming from electric guitar, then the acoustic guitar does feel a little harder to play in some respects. And, if you play regularly, it gets easier. So I'll just say that first. If it feels really difficult at first and, kind of foreign in the way it feels and, playing the notes and so forth, be patient. The more you do it, the easier it gets. You build the calluses and so forth. So that's just something there. However, what I would like to start with today is just some fundamentals and mechanics. So this is all just going to be the one point here, okay? But there's a couple of little separate pieces to it. So there's simple things really that sometimes people don't take into account. They just jump on an acoustic guitar and go, oh man, this feels difficult, and don't bother with it or whatever. Get the wrong sort of start, if you like. So there's a number of things that play either to your advantage or against. And it comes down to things like string gauge. I mean, there are different gauge strings, just like you have with electric guitars. So recently on this guitar, in fact, like a week ago, these are fresh on these strings, I went back down to an 11 gauge. I previously was at 12. Originally at 11, and maybe 5-6 years ago, I changed to 12s. I went back down to 11s, and it's like, why didn't I do this sooner? I sort of went to 12s because I wanted a bit of a fatter tone, but there wasn't really all that much difference between 11s and 12s. And so it feels a lot better. I mean, the 12s were playable, but it just feels better with 11s. So that's one thing. Another thing, just in this same sort of area, is the guitar setup. I mean, if you pick up a guitar in a shop or a friend's guitar, a guitar in a shop's not really going to be set up. So, it's not necessarily going to be feeling great. And if you're picking up someone else's guitar, it's being set up for them, not you. So it's not going to be to your requirements necessarily. And when we're talking about setup, I mean, I'm not a real gearhead, and I'll just give my guitar to someone I can trust to set it up for me. But we're talking about a big one is the action. If the strings, the distance of the strings to the fretboard, I know Mike has an action that you can, put your whole hand through, although I think you might have gone a little lower in recent times, Mike. But I like a low action, particularly on the acoustic guitar. So, the distance of my strings to the fretboard is pretty low. And that makes for easier playing. I don't have to push as much. It's easier to play stuff on the acoustic guitar when the strings are set at a low action. The other thing is the guitar itself. So this guitar here is a Dreadnought. It's quite a thick body. It's a reasonably big guitar. It sits pretty good for me, but someone else, it might be really uncomfortable and not very suitable. So we have different scale lengths and we have different types of guitar, acoustic guitars. Not all acoustic guitars are equal. I've got one here, just to give you an idea. that is much thinner body. This is kind of going the other extreme. This is almost like electric. It's a Guild, and it's a really nice guitar too. Quite a different sound with the thinner body. So those are things to take into account too, the sound you like, but this is quite easy to play, and sort of the dimensions of an electric guitar. So, you know, you've got choices when you're playing an acoustic guitar. And let's see, the other thing you want to consider is pick choice. You know, when you find a pick that you like, you want to really hold on to it, or I do anyway, because even if I go and buy the same pick, it's not quite the same. I just pick up picks off the floor. When I was teaching more offline, students would leave picks around all the time, so I didn't buy picks for years, and I'd find picks and I like them, but there's subtle little things. If I'm doing a lot of strumming, sort of strumming type stuff, I'm going to use a pick that's probably no more than 1 mil. I think this is hard to read on here, but I think it's no more than 1 mil anyway. It's got a little bit of grip on there, and there's something about this particular pick that I like. I've got another one here that's very similar, same width and you know, thickness. I don't like it as much. This one feels a lot better. So even the same gauge pick, it can differ. I mean, maybe I'm a little fussy with this, but when you find something, it just cuts through the strings a little bit more. All these things add to making things easier on the acoustic guitar before we look at anything else. I also use the rounded side of the pick. I never use the pointy end of the pick here. I changed that about 5 years ago, and that was because it sort of a little smoother coming through the strings, but more for the sound. I like the sound of that. It's a mellower sound than the pointier end of the pick. So I don't use that end of the pick. So that's not to say that's what you should do, but these are just the things to consider to make acoustic guitar a little easy to play. If you've got a thick pick, just staying on picks for a moment, I've got quite a thick pick there. I like that for to really attack. That's a great sound. But if I go, for me, I like it. If I go and strum with this, I can strum with it, but it's a little clunky. It's not as nice as this one here. Yet this one's soloing. It's okay, and I would solo with this one too. It's a good all-round pick, but sometimes I like the sound of the thicker pick. So these are things to consider before you even do anything on the acoustic guitar, because you can pick up some guitars, and I've picked up guitars in shops that are, you know, thousands of dollars, and they just don't feel good to me. They don't feel nice at all. Maybe with the setup, but you know, these are things to consider to just get off on the right foot when you're playing acoustic guitar. So that'll be my first thing, Mike, just the mechanics and the fundamentals and the setup.
Yeah, that's awesome. Especially, it's interesting what you said about playing with a rounder edge of the pick. I would have never thought of that. That's an interesting point. Especially, most of my viewers are coming in probably from electric guitar playing, and that's probably a new thing for them also. So everybody take note of that. And the other thing you mentioned about string action and string gauge, I actually, like you said, I did play with a super high action and the 10 gauge strings. But a few years back, I actually lowered the action, and obviously, I got a massive boost in speed. But what I would caution everybody is just lowering the action and or just using thinner strings. It's going to make you faster, but it's probably also going to make you sloppier, at least at first, because you're going to have so much speed. I joke about this. It's like having a Bugatti with, you know, Corolla brakes. You need to have more control over what you're doing, and that's what happened to me. Like, I was so fast, but I could play faster than my brain could process for the first time in a long time, and my two-hand synchronization was also not there. And when I was doing legato stuff, I was using too much tension because that's what I was used to. So it took me a while to get used to that. And don't expect that simply lowering the action or lowering string gauge is going to make you play better because of that. Your technique needs to be dialed in general, and also dialed in specifically for the lighter string gauge. But it's going to make everything a whole lot easier, as Simon said. And I also recently switched from 10s to 9 gauge strings, and of course for my vibrato and string bending, everything, it became like a walk in the park. So great stuff there, Simon. It's definitely an important thing to keep in mind. Awesome. So what's next on your list?
Okay, so this one's related to, so there's going to be some things here that will be technical based, talking about technique, and others will be creativity and sort of honing in on the things that make an acoustic guitar an acoustic guitar. Because if you accentuate those things, you'll bring out the potential of the sound. But this one's a technical one. It's really, really simple to fix or get right in the first place. And it's to do with finger picking and the finger picking hand position. Because a lot of the time when people finger pick, particularly if they don't finger pick much, you can kind of tell because they have their hand kind of in a position that it is when you're flat picking. And if you are like that, you've got your fingers and your thumb at incorrect angles to the strings. So basically, what you want when you finger pick is you want your fingers, index, middle, and ring, to be more or less, not exactly, but more or less at a 90 degrees sort of perpendicular to the strings. And then the thumb is kind of at a 45-degree angle to the string. But more so, when you're looking down from your view, your thumb should be in front of the fingers. But a lot of the time, people finger pick. See how here my thumb is behind these fingers. My fingers are out in front of my thumb. We want it like that, not like that. Because like this, there's more tension. You don't get quite the leverage under the string to pluck it. The sound's affected. There's all sorts of issues that are going to come up. And if you don't fix the cause of those, then they'll continue to be a problem. So one way that's very easy and takes no more than really 10 seconds to get this hand in the right position, absolutely guaranteed every single time, is just to simply take the three fingers, index, middle, ring, and you place them all on the third string, side by side, just touching the third string side by side. And then you take the thumb and you also put it on the third string. So at that point, the thumb is definitely in front of the fingers. It has to be if they're all going to be resting on the string there. And then from there, you take your thumb, keeping the other three fingers where they are, you take your thumb and you put it on the bottom string. You leave your index where it is, the index, that one, on the third string. You leave that there. You take your middle finger and you move it to the second string, and your ring finger goes to the first, and you're in position. You're all good to go. So that's it. That takes no time at all. You just put three fingers on, thumb, then spread it out, keeping the index where it is. And here's the thing that kind of, some people say, don't do this. Others say, do it. I was, don't do it. And then I reverted back from that. But there's a bit of a caveat here. And that is with your pinky. Do you rest your pinky on the body of the guitar? Some will say yes, some will say no. I say yes, like it's a good little stability point to have, and it gives you a little bit of supports the hand. But the thing is, sometimes people really push and anchor down on that pinky, and it puts all sorts of excess tension into your arm and fingers and so forth, and it's kind of glued down on the spot and it won't move. When I put my pinky there, it's very, very, very light. It's just a little, it's just like, yeah, there's the body and here's my fingers, and that's about it. And if I need to move my hand around at all, the pinky will move with my hand. It won't stay here as I move. So that's something that's very simple to fix, and something that I would recommend you do multiple times throughout a session if you're finger picking, that is, just to keep, because if you've been doing this, that's your natural position. So you need to train it. So you need to just keep checking back, be aware, go through that little routine, make sure it's right, pick a wave. If it starts to go back like this, then back you go. If you've never finger picked before, you can get it going right, but you still might find you want to do this because your hand's used to that angle more with flat pick. So, just keep reverting back to that regularly. And if you do, you won't have to do it for too much longer, and you'll have that hand in the right position, just so that you can pick the strings and keep the wrist nice and still. It's all in the fingers for the most part, and the pinky can just rest on the body of the guitar there. So that's a technical one that's going to make life easier, make your sound better when finger picking.
Yeah, that's a great tip as well. And I am a big fan of these little things, little technique tweaks that are non-obvious, almost like sleight of hand for a magician, that make things a lot easier. One thing I say to my guitar students about the fretting hand, is kind of similar actually, is that the thumb position of the fretting hand gives a lot of people a lot of problems, as I'm sure you know, Simon, when it comes to stretching and all kinds of things. And the reason why this happens is people try to put the thumb in some position where they heard some guitar teacher, the thumb should go in this spot or that spot or whatever, or they don't think about it at all. And then the fingers end up being like the servants of the thumb. The position of these fingers is dictated by where the thumb is, how easy stretching is, it's all dictated by the thumb. And I say flip that. So with the thumb just kind of dangling here, put the fingers on the fretboard exactly where you need them for the chord or for the run you're trying to play, and then put the thumb afterwards. And that is a game changer because you immediately find the right fretting hand position that feels easy, and then that's the thumb position where it should be for that lick, and there's no guesswork involved. So you kind of describe the same thing for the picking or the strumming hand, and those two things go hand in hand. So awesome stuff there, Simon. Awesome. So what's next?
Okay, cool. That's really good stuff with thumb. I do that too. I might have actually learned that from you.
Cool.
And that's I do that too because the natural thing, right, is just to squeeze the neck and push as hard with the thumb as you are with the fingers. And I guess with acoustic guitar, if you're coming from electric, it feels like you've got to push a whole lot more. So you might be more inclined to squeeze the neck. And I've taught people before who are used to acoustic and go to electric and they play it out of tune. It's in tune, but they play it out of tune because they're pushing on the notes so much, they're pulling down, and it's all over the place. So it's kind of the opposite. So that's a great one with the thumb.
Mm-hmm.
The next one is more of a sort of to help you sound more musical and more feel. And it's again these are things I'm presenting here as the nature of our stream today is things that can have an almost, if not an immediate effect. And one is dynamics. And dynamics is just simply how loud or how soft you're playing, not in terms of your volume on your amplifier or whatever, but the articulation and the power at which you're plucking the string or strumming or whatever it is. So if you don't have any dynamics, it doesn't matter how technically correct you play and how neat and accurate everything is, it can sound like Guitar Pro playing something back to you with MIDI. It just sounds like the computerized and doesn't have much feel. So a couple of things here. I like to think of dynamics, and someone's dynamics is basically think of three levels. You've got, if you like, the middle one down the line, if we think of a spectrum here, is kind of normal, if we call it that. It's what you normally play at, most likely. Some people are very soft players, but typical sort of just normal volume that you might play at, okay? Then one below that is very soft. So we can play very softly, of course. We can play normal. And we can play very loud, right? You want to sort of just kind of get those parameters there and just get a bit of a scaffolding or a bit of a structure there for dynamics. Very soft, normal, very loud. They're your three basic levels of dynamics that you can think of. And then you want to play everything in between. It's not just very soft, in the middle, and loud. We've got a whole range in between. And you want to have a large dynamic range. It doesn't mean that every time you pick up your guitar to play, you're going to push the boundaries of your dynamic range within a single song, because different songs have different dynamic ranges. Some songs go very soft in parts and very loud, so that's a large dynamic range. Other songs aren't so much. So it depends on what you're doing, but you as a musician want to be able to play and very soft and very loud. So you can have, you can just sort of be aware of that. And then to practice, I'll do this kind of quickly, but to practice the levels in between, start very soft and just doing anything. So I'm just going to pick up and down an E chord here. You start very soft and try and perhaps visualize in someone gradually turning up the volume on your playing. You're gradually getting louder, 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 louder until it's gone from very soft to very loud. And then you bring it back down just gradually again. So you're accessing all those levels in between those three, platforms or whatever you want to call it there. Okay, so a quick demonstration of that. So if I'm on the E very soft, and then you want to gradually bring it up, like the volume's being pulled up. Somewhere around that middle range. Very loud. Okay, it's very rough and just very quick. The idea is to see if you can draw that out a little longer and just gradually move up in volume and down. Okay, just think of that turning of the dial, and it's just making you aware and building your awareness of dynamics, and that you can play very soft, you can play very loud, and sometimes you're going to do all that within a single bar. When you're strumming, not every strum is equal. You're typically going to, some beats are going to pop out because you really want to accent them. Others are going to stand back. So within a single bar, you're going to have a lot of dynamic level happening. But of course, across the duration of a song, you've got dynamics as well. I kind of call within a single bar and, one strum to the next or notes is sort of microdynamics, and macrodynamics would be what's happening over the full song. The other thing I want to tie in here is rubato. So you're not going to play everything rubato, but stretching time is another thing that adds to the feel of what you do. So I'll demonstrate that with a little excerpt here of a piece, and I'm going to play it with no dynamic. I'm just going to play it at a single volume level, no rubato, anything like that, just very, very straight. So I'll do that, and then I'll play it with rubato and some dynamics, and see if you can hear the difference. So without any of that. Right, so all of that was fine technically. It was pretty accurate, I think. But there was absolutely no feel there. It was at the same volume level. There's no rubato. Now that's fine, but for a piece like that, it's typically played with some rubato. It's a classical piece. And so I'm going to do that now. And I'm also going to play around with the dynamics a little bit and see, or hear rather, the difference. So same thing. Okay, so there's a world of difference in those two examples there. Both are correct, both are accurate, but one's got a lot more feel because it's been played rubato. But again, you're not going to do everything like that. It just suits that particular piece. But there's more dynamics too. It wasn't like I went real loud and real soft in an odd sort of way, but certain things I want to accent a little more than others. There's little melodic components there and all sorts of things. Now, how I do that might be very different to how someone else interprets it. So there's no right or wrong per se, other than just how you feel it. But you want to feel it. You don't want to just look at the mechanics of something. So that's a big part. And it's something that you can improve over time, but it's also one of those things once you're aware of, immediately it has a difference no matter what level you play at. As soon as you think about dynamics, just making some adjustment to that or some thought towards that makes a difference to your sound. So I think that's our third thing in terms of getting a better sound.
Yeah, that's great stuff, Simon, and I could definitely hear the difference in the excerpt that you played. One thing that I often say to my guitar students, the volume knob analogy is great. It's actually exactly how I describe it. The way I introduce dynamics, because electric guitar, not that it doesn't have dynamics, of course it does, but most of the time, one of the problems people have with dynamics on a technical level is the moment they start like picking louder, their fretting hand tenses up. And so what I train people to do to break through that is very similar to what you described with just strumming the E chord and starting softer and then gradually getting louder and louder. And one thing I add to that is make sure your fretting hand stays relaxed as you're doing it, so that this hand is independent of what this hand is doing. So you can pick the crap or strum the crap out of the strings to make them super loud. This hand should be just as relaxed. And then when you're backing off, this hand also should be unaffected, similar to how piano players do one thing with this hand, one thing with that hand. And then you can get the benefits of everything that Simon was describing. And exactly as you said, the moment you just start paying attention to it, it's going to affect your playing in a massive way. And of course, for acoustic playing, where you don't have the amplifier, as much as distortion or all the effects, that is your main weapon for making your playing really, really creative and expressive. So that is Great stuff, Simon. All right, so what's next on your list?
All right, so looking at chord extensions. So now these can get involved and challenging, but there is also very easy ways to immediately add this to your playing if it's something you don't do, or if it's something you do when a song tells you to do it, but you don't do it in your own playing, just jamming around or whatever. So we'll look at a few individual chords here first. So if I have an A minor chord, I can just simply lift a finger off and I've extended the chord, or I've changed the chord in some way. It's still, this is an A suspended when I do this. We don't want to get too caught up in all the names and so forth, and that's neither really major or minor, but it's in sort of the context of A minor here. But if we just lift off the first finger, we get an extension to that chord, or a changing the sound of that chord. If I take my third finger off, then I've extended the chord by adding a G note to the chord, which makes it an A minor 7. If I take an F chord, a little F major 7 actually I'll play here, so just the 3 fingers, just a little F fragment here. If I take the middle finger off, it's an F it's an F major 7 with a suspended 2 there, right? It's got the G note in there. Okay, or if I take my first finger off, I get the sharp 11. Again, don't get so caught up with the names. It's just, does it sound good? Cool. It's like, I think of the chords as colors. So if you just play C major, F major, A minor, D major, that's kind of like, yeah, you got your red and your blue and your green and your yellow, but there's lots of, there's a spectrum to red and blue and green and yellow. So we're not changing the color here so much as we're changing just the shade of it, if you like, when you're on a single chord. So here's F, here's another little variation of F, here's another one. And there's a few others that we could do, but I'm looking at ones that just require you more or less to take a finger off. So it ends up being even easier to play the chord than the original chord that you're extending on, because you're taking a finger away, but by doing so, you're adding a note, the open string, into the chord. And all of these can be played over a static F chord, right? They'll all work nicely. So, a C chord, you can take your first finger off, sounds nice. You could take your second finger off to get a bit of a 9 sound there. Could be a little muddy against the C in the bass, but it depends how you use it. But that's another example there with the C chord. So, and there's many others you can do. I mean, you could take a C and just add your pinky, and that's simple enough to do. So you can add notes, but I'm looking for the ones that are super, super easy. And if you look at just taking a finger away, now sometimes it might not work. I mean, if I take, the root note away, well, then it becomes an A minor 7. It works, but it's kind of A minor 7 now, not C. So you want to sort of experiment with this, but that's the whole idea. G chord, with finger picking in particular, or actually I shouldn't just say finger picking, when playing extensions on a G major chord, you don't really, for the most part, want to play G like this, all 4 fingers, or if you do the 3 fingers, because it kind of, all fingers are taken up here, and some of the extensions we like are kind of over here, and there's nothing there to get it. So for a G chord, I will typically play either my third and my pinky, 3rd fret, bottom string and top string. I take out the B, bit muddy and not really needed for the most part. So I take it out and I block the A string, because we don't want that in our chord. And what happens here is you get a nice G chord, full sounding chord, and 2 fingers are spared to play little embellishments on the G chord. And furthermore, you could also take the pinky off, and if you do that, you can either just keep it real simple and have 1 finger for the G and still get a big sound. If you want to include the top string, it becomes a G6, so that's sort of going back to what we're doing with the other chords. That sounds fine. But basically, this 3rd finger is the chord. So imagine on a piano, you've got your chord, G, that's all there, and nice full sounding, and then you can play. You've got the whole scale basically there to play over the chord, and there's a lot that you can do just on a G chord there. So that's a way I'll play a G chord a lot. If I'm just strumming something out, I'll play G like that. So I certainly play it a lot like that as well. But for things with embellishments and so forth, that's a good way to play G. So if we had just putting that together here, just to give you a little bit more of an idea, if I have a chord progression without any extensions, like an A minor and an F and a C and a G, that's all fine, but we can get more variation by doing some of our extensions. Right, there's more color in there, and that's just some of the possibilities. Okay, so it doesn't have to be trying to play chords with thumbs over the top and all fingers and all this sort of stuff going on. That's all great stuff that you can do, but you can get that variation in sound and more scope to the chords by just playing some open chords and removing various fingers off of them. So that'd be a good little, shortcut, if you like, into the world of chord extensions.
Yeah, that is very, very cool stuff. And of course, everybody, even electric guitar players, can do this on just clean electric sound. And the guy who, in my mind, is one of the best at this is John Petrucci. A lot of his songwriting ideas involve a lot of chord extensions, and he's really, really great at that. And it's funny you mentioned some of the notes muddying up the chords. That definitely happens, especially for electric players when they try to use distortion and they use like major third and minor third intervals on the bottom two strings or three strings. It sounds horrible because it's very muddy. So the solution to that for electric players listening is to use perfect intervals, which is why power chords sound so good, because the perfect interval doesn't have that muddy sound. It sounds really tight. It sounds like one unit. Perfect fourths also sound good. So if you put inversions invert the chord so that the perfect interval within the chord, the fourth or the fifth, is in the bass, then you can do more extensions and like dissonant stuff on the higher strings, similar to what Simon was describing. Add different extensions that will allow you to use the things that Simon was explaining with chord extensions in your distorted electric playing as well, even though we're talking about acoustic playing, but I want to throw in my perspective also. And obviously, when you use either clean electric guitar, or acoustic guitar, then do all the things Simon was saying, and it's going to be awesome. Cool. So let's move along. What's next on your list?
Okay, so this one's very much related. Embellishment, so embellishing chords. So basically we want to create movement across a static chord, basically. So if I take that same example of A minor, F, C, and G. So before I was taking a finger away, and it's still a static sort of sound. There's no movement in the chord. It's what you hear is what you get, sort of thing. And I was doing that on my F, and I was doing that on my C, and on my G for the most part anyway. So here we can, it's really, little hammer-ons and pull-off. Little embellishments like that, little ornamentations. So a real simple way to begin would be just to take any finger away and pick the string that that you've taken a finger off amongst the chord. And when you pick it, hammer the finger back down, don't leave it open. So I could do this with my second finger in the A minor, or I could do it with my third finger, or my first. Okay, that's all just creating little ornamentations of movement across. Someone could just be strumming out an A minor chord there, and you could be doing those things on top, or you might just be playing on your own. So you could take like your F chord and do the same thing. You could do it with the root note there. Maybe you want to keep the root there and maybe not do it with the root, but I mean, it works. It certainly will work with the second finger. You can also combine pull-offs and hammer-ons. So you get the more movement happening there, more ornamentation. Or you could just leave it off. Okay, so you're getting more frilly sort of sounds here with your chords. C chord, it's a real classic to hammer on this third, doing the thirds in chords. I did that on the F, so there's some real classic moves. So that's playing around with the third on that C chord. You can do that when you're picking, or you can do it when you're strumming. Just to create that movement in the chord. So, but it works on pretty much any of the notes there. So that's really good too. It's very much related to what we're just talking about, but it's a little extension on the extensions. And if I kind of play around on that chord progression doing that, so you can get all that movement happening. Okay, so that would be the next thing that will contribute to open chords, but this works with any chord obviously, but easiest with open chords.
Yeah, and one thing I would say, now that we have like a nice list of ideas already on the table, when you guys start applying the things that Simon was saying, don't just try to apply them in your own playing. Listen for those ideas in other people's playing. So make a list of acoustic guitar players whom you like, listen to their tunes, and ask yourself, how many of these things can you hear, and what are all the ways you hear the ideas being applied? Because Simon just gave you a few ways to apply each one, but if we had 2 hours to talk about each one, I'm sure you could come up with 50 ways to possibly apply dynamics or chord extensions or movement within the chord or whatnot. And so part of your job as you're practicing is, again, to look for these ideas in other people's playing, and that's going to spark new ways to apply just the raw concepts beyond just the examples that Simon is given here. So that is that's really awesome stuff, Simon. Cool. So let's move along.
Okay, so this one relates to very much the thing with acoustic guitar that you'll notice if you're coming across from electric is the lack of sustain. Even when you're amplified, it doesn't quite have the same sustain as an electric guitar. Obviously, you don't have distortion. And if you come across to an acoustic guitar and you try and play it like an electric, it's going to be hard work and it's not going to sound so good. Of course, there's obvious similarities, but there are differences too. And there's characteristics of an acoustic guitar that you can do on the electric, of course, but perhaps they're a little bit more, hold a little bit more weight with acoustic guitar just because of the lack of sustain and so forth. And what I'm talking about here is open strings. So of course, we were just playing open strings, right? We're playing open chords. That's a given. You're going to be playing open strings there. But we can do so much more with open strings outside of playing in the open position. And it's an area I've looked at a lot over the years because I love the sound, but also because of, I'm playing on an acoustic guitar and the open string resonates a lot more. So it kind of helps with the sustain. And it can be done in a rhythm guitar context as well as a lead guitar context. So I'm going to just show you a couple of really simple things here that you can do to get this concept into your playing. And one of them is just to simply take open chords and play them up the fretboard, right? Without changing this. I'm not talking about refretting the shape and carrying it up the fretboard and continuing with all fretted notes. I mean, take the chord and move it up the fretboard. And so what happens is the notes of the chord change as you move them up, but the open strings are constant and they react differently against the notes of the new position. And therefore you're not, going from this C, this is not a straight D chord. This is a D with a 11 in there, the G, a 9, the E, okay? That's quite a common substitution or variation of simply going C to D. It's really nice. Big, nice, open, resonating sound. Now, it's not always going to work. If I just took that up one fret, it sounds pretty horrible, right? Or it's not going to sound so good there either, or at least it's not out of context and it's going to be a very dissonant sound. But there's quite a few positions that the C works. Little clash with the open G there, but you could avoid that. Or the F is nice, the G is nice. So you got like a okay, it's a different way to play C, D, F, and G. Another example would be, let's say if I take a chord progression that goes from an E to a D to an A back to an E, I could do that with the E shape all the way. So I can take that E chord shape and move it up an octave, and that's a really nice big open sound because it's still E in every respect. There's nothing's changed except the fretted notes have moved up an octave, the open strings have stayed. So it's a nice wider, broader sound. If I move that down a fret, 2 frets, I get my D. If I move it down to the 7th, 6th position there, it's an A, and back to my E. You could think of it as just the, part of the bar chord. So we've got the E, the D to the A, and the E down the octave. Now you could, if you want, and I was doing this, pedal the low E string throughout. Kind of works nice. But if you don't want to hear that other than the E chord, then when you get to D, just play from the 5th string. Likewise with the A, and then back to the E here. Now, A chord works well. I can move the A up the fretboard, so a chord progression that I might play like A to C to D to A, I could do that with just the A shape. I could be the A, the C, the D, and the A. Okay, so it gives you a nice big resonating sound, but also you're getting some extensions again to the chord. You don't have to know what they are. You just get them because of the whole concept of the open strings remaining the same while the fretted notes change. Now another related one here, open strings, so same point here, is, and these are the sorts of things, again, that you've got to do to kind of tap into the characteristics of the acoustic guitar and getting that nice big sound without the sustain of an electric and the distortion. So if we consider a little chord vamp here, E to A, that's fine. Of course we can do that, and we could play it with bar chords, I guess. We've got an E and the A, wherever you want to play it with the bar chords. But if we take little triad shapes, little 3-note chords, and I'm going to use a little triad shape here on the string set 432, and all it is the little middle section fragment of the bar chord, root 6, so A here. Now, in and of itself, just there, you can drone the low A string and the top E and get a nice big sound again. But what I like to do too, sometimes, is just take the first finger away and add an additional open string. So we get the B in there. So now we got like an add 9 and the E on top as well, and the low A. Right? So we get a nice big open sound. And I could take that idea and move it to E. So E up here, 14th position, take the first finger off. I would block out the A string if I'm strumming. And I get that little triad shape, similar to the whole E chord we were doing before. This all sort of crosses over. And I could get the E there, and I could finger pick it if I wanted, so I can be more selective with my strings, and I could come down to the A. We can use these natural harmonics to bring into, harmonics are great, natural harmonics on, you know, on the acoustic guitar are often used a lot. And I can get a bigger open sound like that. But when I play the triad with just two fingers, I take a finger away, I then, as I said, you get the added open string, but also then you can just add little melodies on top, or just add a finger and take it away, see how it sounds. I mean, you might try somewhere and obviously you'll hear when it doesn't work, but that's fine. See what works, and when you come down, okay, and you get nice big open sounds. Now that's just using one triad shape. When you learn the other triad shapes, so for example, if I've got E here, I could use a little A here, and I don't even then need to move position. And I could come down to my E here. This is a little E triad shape. Take a finger away, utilize the open strings. Here's an A. Doing the same thing. When I come down, A. I like that sort of Lydian sound there. If we're thinking of the key V, or A Lydian rather. That's a really nice sound. So you can get all sorts of sounds. You can get like a bluesy sound. Get all sorts of possibilities, and you can strum them if you mute strings out. So there's three, I mean, that's just one string set there. There's three different positions. You can overlap them, and there's all sorts of things that you can do. Just, you know, noodle around on those, and it's all just, you know, in this case, I mean, you can apply it to anything. Obviously, it's going to work best with E and A. D works too with the low open D string. So you are limited a little bit because the open strings don't change. So you really only got a few roots, you know, root notes down here, but you know, it certainly works for keys friendly to open strings. So that would be I think that might be the sixth thing there, Mike, using open strings.
Yeah, awesome ideas there. And I would say that obviously that there's a lot of room for experimentation here, but the nuance to this experimentation is when you are taking a shape that you know you're moving it around and it sounds like crap, don't just be like, oh, that sounds like crap, let me completely abandon this and go to something completely different. Don't do that. Use your music theory knowledge and your fretboard knowledge to ask yourself, why does it sound like crap? Because there's oftentimes just by changing one note in that crappy chord, by either adding a finger or sliding something one fret up or down or whatever, it sounds all of a sudden sounds much better. So it's not that the idea itself is bad, it's that there's just some nasty dissonance that sounds bad, and you can tweak it oftentimes by changing one fret, which actually, like, little half steps make the most dramatic difference. So my point here is think about each idea and adapt it. Adapt each chord fingering that may not sound nice right away, and rely upon your other skills, music theory, ear training, to tell you both how to make it sound better and also identify what the chord is once you find it, at least as best as you can. Like, oh, this is some kind of a A11 chord or you know, a 7 sharp 9 or whatever. Because this way you'll remember it much better. You'll be able to use it in your songs much more readily than as opposed to just having, oh, that's a cool idea, and then like 2 weeks later you don't remember what it was. So that will help you to use more of the things Simon was saying. Awesome. So let's what's next?
Okay, yeah, made me think there too. I mean, just on the open string thing, you know, we all know this, right? Right, very famous, not comfortably, Shone on You Crazy Diamond, Pink Floyd. That would not be the same if it was played all fretted notes, you know, yet we're not in an open position. Electric guitar, so of course it can be done on electric guitar, but when you, I mean, if you know that riff, it's going to sound nice to you, but that's something that you might do initially and think, oh, that doesn't sound too good, and you just, as you say, you move on too quickly. We need dissonance anyway in music, so it's just how you use it. So yeah, that's a good point there. Number 7. So this one is often associated with acoustic guitar, and it's right here. It's the capo, and you get. I always laugh. Sometimes I do things on capo. Maybe it's a video or something, and there'll always be someone there who says, "Are you cheating?" And it just makes me laugh because it's such an ignorant view. So it's not cheating. It's a creative tool, and it's one that you can use quite often, depending on what you're doing. Now, I just want to quickly touch on 2 ways I would use a capo, perhaps. One of two of many ways, actually. But if I've got a chord progression that's, let's say it's in B flat, right? So we've got like the B flat, the E flat. Let's say we've got a G minor and an F. So we've got a 1 chord to a 4 to a 6 minor to a 5 F. Now, there's nothing wrong with playing that with bar chords, but I'm not going to get a nice open resonating sound with bar chords. Now, I might not want that sound, so bar chords suit, so that's not a problem. But if I use a capo, I'm not using it because I can't play bar chords, therefore cheating. It's because I want it to sound differently, or I want to be able to do something that's not going to be quite possible to do, or doesn't quite come off as well when I've got to fret everything and use more fingers. So with something like that, there's a number of positions you could capo for it. Of course, you could capo at the first position and play in the key of A. So we're really hearing the key of B flat here, but you would call it probably A capo first fret. And then you can get the same chords to the 4, to the 6, to the 5. Now there's a bar chord in there. We're not trying to avoid bar chords, but it would be a little silly or a bit redundant, if you like, if I capo somewhere and everything's a bar chord. It's like, well, what's the point of having the capo? But certainly you'll get some bar chords in there. But I might see here, I've got different shapes. So it also influences the way I might play the chord. I like sometimes this F sharp minor here. I like to include the open top strings sometimes on that, instead of just playing the full chord like that, and to the E. If we capoed at the 3rd fret, then we're in G getting the same sound. What have we got? The 1, the 4, then it was the 6 and the 5. So now we've got all open chords, and we can do more little embellishments and with that. Maybe what do we have? We had the 6, and we might move the C up 2 frets for the D, so we can kind of incorporate some of the open string stuff we were talking about before. The other thing with capo is you don't always have to wait for a situation where you're trying to make bar chords into open chords for the possibilities I was just demonstrating there. You also can take an existing open chord progression and capo it so it gives you different open chords. So for example, if we had a chord progression where we're just playing the, let's say in A, playing a 1, a 5, and let's say the 4. So like on an A, and different chords, shapes give you different possibilities for little extensions and embellishments. D's are classic for these little trills and things on top, and that's fine. But what if I want to play that same chord progression with open chords, but I want to stay in the key of A? That's my key, for whatever reason it needs to be A. So I could capo the 2nd fret, because I might prefer to be playing the G, shapes in G. Still going to be hearing the same key, but it's different because you've got a different voiced chord, a different shape there. So you got your 1 in G, and you got your 4, and you got your, what was our chord? Sorry, it was our 1, then it was our 5, and C, and I could and they've all got their little characteristic ways of, playing. So I don't always have to wait for open bar chords. I can just take something that's open and capo, and away you go. And if you're playing with somebody else, another player, probably, again, capo's used on electric guitar, of course, but it's probably more associated with acoustic guitar, and you see it more with, acoustic guitar. But often I've done a lot of gigs before where I have someone else playing, and often I'll be capoed and the other person won't be, or they'll be capoed in one position and I'll be capoed in another. And so that just has a nice little nuance that occurs between the two parts. We're playing the same chords, but they are different voicings. The order of the notes are different. So if I'm playing an A chord with a G shape here and someone else is playing just this one, there is a nice, they work nicely together. The only thing is that I find is if I've forgotten the chords to something, often I'll look at the other person to try and follow what they're doing. And I've made that mistake before, thinking, oh shit, they got the capo on here. So that throws that away. But, you should know your part. But that works really well too. Just different capo positions, or one guitar capoed, one not. Because the other thing, particularly when you capoed quite high, famous tune for capoing is Hotel California. Etc. Right? And all that sort of business there. Now that's great. That sounds good. But your lowest note is now that you've cut off, quite a bit of the lower range. So if I'm playing that song with somebody else, I'm always going to make sure if I'm capoed here, they're not going to be capoed, and they're going to be down here, and they can get all the lower sounds. And I'm also talking about, in this context, playing sort of with just acoustic guitars, no bass. But even so, even if there's bass, the guitar range is cut greatly if you're both capoed here. So you wouldn't really want to do that. But certainly one part like that and another not capoed works really nicely together. So just using the capo in different creative ways. You can always, use a capo when the music tells you to. It says capo whatever fret, but think about how you might do something yourself. Arranging stuff is something I love doing, and it's something you can learn a lot from. And often I'll use the capo for something because it gives me chords that I want for the things that I want to do. So that will be number 7 there, Mike, using the capo.
Yes, awesome stuff. That's something I've actually have very little experience with using the capo, so I'm glad you were able to offer your insights there, Simon. It's very, very, very interesting things that I would never have thought about. Cool. So you have an ebook, I believe, for my viewers. Would you like to talk about that real quick?
Sure. Yeah. So this is an ebook that comes with video examples. So basically, it's it's finger picking. So if you like finger picking, if you're new to finger picking, this would be perfect, because what I've done here is a lot of the time people focus on finger picking patterns and wonder why they don't sound very good finger picking. If all you do is focus on the pattern itself, then you're going to get something technically down, but it's not going to sound so great when you're just playing it with open chords and so forth. So in this book, I've taken 10 different patterns and applied them in very musical ways, melodic ways. So similar to some of the things we've done today, but more than what we've done today too. But very simple things that sound very, very cool. So you might be playing an A minor chord here instead of just always playing in the open position and so forth. And just things that sound very nice. In fact, there's not even too many, from memory, all that many chords in this book. It's little harmonies and things like that sound very nice, applying finger picking patterns. And it comes with videos, so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So there's a video page you'll get access to, and all the video examples will be there of the finger picking patterns. So you can go to the link there and you can download that for free and get started with some finger picking patterns.
Awesome. And I'm going to also have a link to this in the description of this video, so you guys can check it out. That's highly recommended. Good stuff there from Simon. And I also have a video for you guys, my masterclass on how to build guitar speed without doing any slow practice at all. If you have been trying to build speed and you're stuck, and the whole start slow and gradually build speed, a few BPM at a time way hasn't really gotten you very far, well, this is a different way you probably have never heard about that works really, really well and does not require a lot of practice time. So this is also free. Go to this link, check it out, and enjoy. Awesome. So thank you so much, Simon, for coming on and sharing your awesome insights about acoustic guitar playing. I personally learned a lot, and I hope everybody who's been watching also learned a whole bunch. Everybody go to check out Simon's ebook. It's great stuff. And I think that's all. Any final words you want to say, Simon?
Well, thank you first for having me here. Very much appreciated, and I hope, that I was able to offer some insights into things. But I would just say, if you're jumping onto the, just in summary, jumping on acoustic guitar, to not try and just play it like the electric. Think of, look at different players and how they play, but the open strings, harmonics are great, all this sort of stuff. Just while there's many similarities, there are differences. So if you just try and play it like an acoustic, like an electric, it's going to feel like hard work and it's not going to sound that great. So but thank you very much for having me here, Mike. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Simon. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend. We will see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers.